Welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture, brought to you by Dallas Theological Seminary.
So if I were to ask you, what would you hope someone who goes to the movie, and this is probably a terrible question to ask someone who does a movie, you know, because I'll let them react however they react to whatever it is that I do. But what would your hope be if someone goes to see The Hornet's Nest or watches it on DVD? What do you hope their reaction would be?
You know what? Here's honestly, like ticker tape parades are wonderful and a beautiful gesture, but the day after the tape has fallen, you know, what's left? And so even after people see the film and they applaud and, you know, there's a beautiful reaction there, what I'm more concerned about is when they come home into their communities, how are they going to connect with their veterans? You know, how are they going to connect with, you know, some of these people who have been through some pretty tough things? Are they going to have patience? Are they going to have love? Are they going to step out and really care? You know, I appreciate thank yous and I appreciate hugs. But more than that, it's just the relationships that I think what we're going to be needing as we move forward. As this, America's longest war comes to a close, our community is going to be responding with relationships and love. And we're going to be absorbing, this may not be fair to ask you this, but we're going to be absorbing back into our society a large amount of veterans. Do you have any idea what that number would be? So that is, over the next 2 years, we're looking at between 150 and 170,000 who are going to be leaving military service and coming back into the communities. You know, we are doing budget cuts. The military is going to be reduced unless Congress suddenly changes something. That is happening. And so we have to begin getting ready for that. But also, I mean, over the past 10 years, we've had people enter in the military service and then get out. And so there's all of these veterans who are still in our population. And so how do we welcome them home?
So that means, you know, being willing to offer them a job. I mean, you're talking pretty basic stuff, aren't you?
It's the bread and butter of things. I think it just, and these are qualified, sharp individuals who have had, you know, their leadership tested to the nth degree. They're good to go. You know, they'll accomplish the mission, whatever the mission is. But they have to get plugged back into society. So the concrete reality is that the best way to honor a war veteran in very many ways is to make sure that they are welcomed back in full into society and have a place to land, a job. And I imagine it's got to be incredibly discouraging to have gone overseas, to have fought for your country, to come home, to look for a job, to not be able to find employment and just sit there and process what it is that you've been through without feeling like there's anything on the other end. And I know the job market is already hard as is. And so, you know, we're going to be in some, you know, I don't want to predict difficult times, but that is a hard question to answer. And, you know, I definitely don't have the answer on my own. Just a conversation we need to begin having you know, across the country. But also I would say, something that we can do, a target that we know that we can hit. I honestly believe that our country can be changed with barbecue. I'm from Texas, so barbecue is usually my answer to most problems.
Right.
But the simple concept of simply let's have some get-togethers. Let's if it's not barbecue, it's fly fishing. You know, it's hunting. It's activities, and you know.
So including them in your circle and helping them get re-networked and reconnected to the society that they came out of, and although they're oftentimes landing in a completely different place than where they left from when they came into the military.
And I think that this is a definite thing churches can do, and just opening up their doors and doing events for veterans in the community. I mean, that would be beautiful, you know. And I think it's hard to say, you know, hey, we're going to have a relationship. And that kind of freaks people out, like, you know, we're going to get really close. But if you say, hey, why don't you come out to a barbecue? Sometimes that's an easier invitation to accept than saying, hey, why don't you come to church with us? Sometimes it has to start with barbecue or coffee shop or these other middle grounds before we say, hey, we got a great service, you know, this Sunday. You need to come out too. Sometimes that's too much for some people. So
if you've been in the chaplaincy how long now?
For 5 years.
For 5 years.
Yes, sir.
And what do you think being in the chaplaincy has taught you as a person? It's obviously exposed you to things that I'm sure you necessarily didn't anticipate when you're sitting in class here at Dallas.
Yeah. Keep my head down. Yeah, if you're low, then you're probably good. No, you know what? It's honestly, I don't think ministry is really that different anywhere you go. Because no matter the context or the difficulties, I just pursuing God in the midst of it. Making sure that I'm staying connected, making sure that I'm keeping Him the priority in my life. And that gets hard, whenever you are so busy and so distracted by so many different things. And so I struggle with that, to really try to keep that number one. Second, that my number one job, if I fail at everything else, as long as I really am loving these guys selflessly and putting them before myself, then I'm going to be doing ministry. I'm going to be working on the sermons. I'm going to be doing good counselings. So I think that's my top two.
What are you working on these days? What's next for you?
So the next is going to be the next film. And so we're going to be starting production June 13th, and we're going to be rolling the cameras and running around with a film called No Greater Love, which is the follow-up documentary, which tells my story as a brand new chaplain and what the guys taught me. And we will be actually following up with a lot of the guys that I served with here in the States. And so I'm going to fly from Germany and do some interviews with them to see how are they coming home. What are they processing? What are they dealing with?
So it's the other half of the story in very many ways.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And I think it's timely too, because this is the stage we are at in our country. And so how do we fully come home? Not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. And so I'm going to go on the journey across the country to follow up with them, but also to really explain, where I'm at, how I struggle with PTS, my struggles with depression, and how I'm trying to pursue help myself, to get through that. Because it's not that I was in some sort of miraculous bubble when I was going through, that war. I'm affected too. God lets me be affected,
right?
And so it's my journey as well. And we will finish shooting, and then we should have the film completed around October, November. Yeah,
which will be about the time this will release. Are you doing this? Is this the same team that did Hornet?
Yes, sir.
So
it's the exact same team.
Okay, so you've got the reporter as a part of your
He's
team?
going to be probably one of our, we'll have to check with him. He's probably going to be one of our executive producers, just helping us. But, we have an Emmy Award winning team. All of these guys are very, very sharp individuals at what they do. So they're the ones who are going to be helping craft this out. And, so we should hopefully, we'll have a finished product, and then 2015 is when we're really going to be running with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Hornet's Nest is in the theaters now, and by the time this releases, it probably will no longer be there, but it'll be in DVD.
DVD and Blu-ray.
That's right. And as we mentioned, you're stationed in Germany. How long will you remain in Germany?
Until February 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're, and that's everything that you do comes out of that. That's your base.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long have you been there?
For 2 years right now, and so in total, I'll have been there for 3 years. And absolutely loving it. Yeah,
Germany's a great place to live. Like I said, we lived there a year at a time, 4 separate times, and really enjoyed the experience. I want to ask you how your German is, and I want to ask you which Bundesliga football club you support. Yeah.
My neighbor keeps on getting on to me too. He's like,
go.
"Where's your German at?" And I'm like, I don't know. I lost it.
Yeah, most Germans speak English, so
Yes,
it's kind of hard to learn German.
is.
Yeah, so you always ask them, do you know English? And the answer is always a little bit, and then their German is their English is impeccable. So
their little bit is a lot.
Yeah, exactly. If I knew the little bit of German that they knew the little bit of English, we wouldn't be speaking in English.
No.
So it's amazing. So so you've got almost another year and a half, basically, or almost 2 years left.
Well, let's see, where are we at? Actually, just a year left.
That's a year left. That's right. Yeah,
so it's short.
Yeah, so it does go fast.
It does.
Yeah. And what do you hope to do when you come back?
Well, that's the thing is like it's either stay in the military or continue to work on film. And I've loved my time in the military. I mean, absolutely, this has been the most amazing thing I've ever been a part of in my life. But we do have some opportunities opening up, and I do love working on film. And it's so we're praying about it, and just kind of seeing what direction God leads us in right now. And so we do know what projects we want to work on next if that door opens, and so we're praying that it does.
Now, I've indirectly asked you this, but I think I'm going to ask a focused question that does it. So if you were giving advice to someone about how to deal with a veteran who's coming home, basically, I think the bottom line of what I'm hearing from you is get to know them and help them become a part of the society that they're returning to. Is that the kind of the key, homiletical idea here?
I'd almost like to say, like without naming the action, I would just say reach out and love. And whatever action that looks like, just to reach out and love, establish relationships. And so I think it's, in the ministry, our job is to care for people, care for broken people, and to just sincerely love people. And so that doesn't change anything. And the churches are designed for broken people. If it's a church that's not filled with broken people, then I'm not sure what's going on.
Right, right.
And so that's what the church is there for in these ministries. And so we have a specific influx of a particular group. And not all veterans are just falling apart. Most of them are normal people, but they've been through some tough stuff. And so any kind of outreach just to help them connect, love on them, that's, I think, the will of God. It's just ministry.
Now that's generic advice for anybody.
It is.
Let me focus the question in a slightly different direction, and that is, if you were to give advice to pastors of churches and to other church leaders about what to think about, because they not only have the individual responsibility of these individual relationships, but maybe even a little more corporate responsibility. What kind of advice would you give to pastors and church leaders about military who they find walking through their doors?
I think one of the big fears that I've actually had a lot of personal conversations since I've been here in Dallas about is that they say, well, I don't know what it's like. I didn't deploy. I never been to war, so I'm not really sure how to approach them, and I'm not really sure how to talk to them about what they've been through. And my advice is that you don't have to be able to relate with everybody. No matter what wounds they have, whatever they've been through, you just have to love them. You just have to open up your heart to them and have confidence, not necessarily in yourself, but in what God has told you. In the gospel. Every person needs that. And so you're not unequipped. You're not. And so that's one thing I just encourage pastors out there, just to simply know that they are fully equipped for this ministry.
So just because you've never been in the military doesn't mean that you can't minister to someone who's been in the military. You can't sit and listen and connect with them and empathize and engage them at a personal level and encourage them and help them.
And that's the thing. It's like so many people, I think they don't know what to say, so they pull away, and then that veteran's off in a corner. And that shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's you don't have to know what to say. You just say, "I love you." Hey, man, welcome back. You know,
yeah, that's right.
Hey, handshake. Thank you for your service. You want some barbecue?
Yeah,
That's all that's needed, and so there should be no awkwardness, and there should be, no hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just love people.
How this is not sound like an odd question, but I think it's a natural one. How awkward is it for the person coming out of the military to be asked a question like, what was it like for you? Or to let them tell their story? How important is that?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on the situation. It depends on the person, because some of them don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and there's some stuff that is hard to talk about without choking up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, tell me about when your best friend died.
Yeah.
Kind of a touchy subject.
Yeah,
and so
right.
it's like, whenever guys have particular awards,
Mm-hmm.
well, always keep in mind that every single award they have, chances are, is from a pretty traumatic situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to talk about, and also it's a lot of those guys who are pinned with medals don't really like wearing them,
Mm-hmm.
Because they are going to think about their buddies who had fallen and who
Mm-hmm.
died, and they're going to feel like, well, I wish he had it instead of me.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so it's always painful. It's a heavy weight. So I think that's something that should be kind of gauged through the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I suspect that's part of what produces the awkwardness, is not knowing, do I engage this part of this person's life, or do I keep a distance, or do I kind of let them set the parameters for how close I let them come, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's of course, as the relationship grows, and they'll share stuff if as they want to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the same thing with the wounded,
Mm-hmm.
the people who are disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not the best idea to kind of start talking about, well, tell me about how this happened.
Right.
Because it could be a traumatic situation that they don't want to talk about. But, man, there's tons of stuff going on that we can talk about outside of that.
And then the tricky part of this, it strikes me in thinking about it as we talk about it, is that the situation of the spouse of the veteran is also in an interesting place, because they can almost be double isolated, if I can say it that way. In other words, person reaches out to the veteran who comes back, and they're the person who's been on the ground and gone through it, and the spouse can almost be a risk being ignored in that process if you're not careful. Yeah,
and the thing is those spouses, and I know generalizing, but those ladies have made as many sacrifices. They have endured sleepless nights. They have during blackouts when somebody's been wounded in the unit and they don't know if it's their husband. And we have a lot of Gold Star wives who are in the congregations, and some people might not even know it. Their sacrifices have been heavy, and the things that they have had to carry on their shoulders are unknown, unrecognized, and nobody walks up to them and thanks them.
Now, just to help people, what's a Gold Star?
So Gold Stars are people who have lost family members in the war, and so spouses and parents and children, and so then they're scattered throughout congregations and communities, and they're struggling too. There's actually a high suicide rate for Gold Stars as well. That's not being discussed.
So you've talked about this some, or alluded to it, and we've alluded to it as well, the suicide ideation and the pressure on suicides, and the fact that many people, when they cope, have trouble, and that there is a suicide problem with returning military, et cetera, and chaplains are right in the front lines of dealing with that aspect of what goes on. So another element, and this is generic counseling in some ways, though, is if you're aware of someone who's kind of on the edge, if I can say it that way, what advice would you give to the person who knows a person in the military who is struggling with their reentry?
It's easier in the Army, because like we can always say, "Well, call the chaplain," because
Yeah,
that's usually the response.
yeah.
And that's job security for us. We stay pretty busy.
Yeah.
But once they're back in the community, there's not that support system, and so it is hard. I mean, I know the VFW and American Legion have great support systems, depending on from community to community. But it's first connecting, reaching out. Assessing the situation. I mean, like, what kind of resources are available? Is there, a minister or somebody who's willing to engage with them? And that's sometimes needed. And so it really depends on the situation, though. But I think checking in and sometimes that's scary, I think. Okay, like I don't know what I'm dealing with here with this person who's really tense and really stressed and really seems off. But that's a broken person, then we have to check in and do ministry. Is
there a place that the military has for people, say like me, who have no military connections whatsoever, but I might know someone who's on, let's say, the edge? Is there a place within the military for them to go, or am I left to my own?
A couple of resources that I do want to point out too. It's like there is also Military One Source, which is an amazing resource that people can call up to. What it does is it just simply connects you to other resources. So that is always available, and they can also connect you to suicide hotlines if that's the situation. And so those are two things. I mean, and the greatest resource of all is Google. So you can always find what you need
Google
to do
for
that.
help. Yeah. But
so,
because I guess what I was fishing for is do the veterans organizations have a place where you can call or anything like that?
Yeah, and it depends on the area too. I know that the VA is always available, and I know that American Legion and VFW, USO, Easter SEALs. I mean, there's so many associations out there that can help connect. And so whatever the problem is, there are resources out there. It's just finding it within your local community and helping them plug in. There's also great organizations that help veterans find jobs to translate their resume to civilian resumes.
Right.
And so these things are scattered throughout, and they're so numerous. We do have the resources. Just connecting is, I think, the biggest difficulty.
Well, Justin, I want to thank you for coming in and talking about this with us.
Yes,
this has been very, very informative. I had the closest I've ever been to the military in my own experience. Actually, it was in Germany when we were in Stuttgart. We went to the International Baptist Church, which is located right next to where a series of Army installations were, and that congregation was about 35% military. And you watch them move through. And in fact, the only time I've spoken to a military audience was in Germany to that group. And and so it's a mobile, in some senses disconnected part of our society that tries to re-enter, and that both the leaving and the returning are very delicate matters for people. And we appreciate both the movie, The Hornet's Nest, and you're taking the time to talk to us about military chaplaincy and what's involved, and getting us sensitive to how people who serve in the military, particularly when they're just back from having served, are an important. It's an important group to keep our eye on and be sensitive, particularly sensitive to, as they seek to re-enter life in a more normal context than the military provides for them.
Well, and so if I can just encourage the audience, we do have a Facebook page for the next film as well. No Greater Love, the movie, and the website's going to be up as well. And so if people want to engage with that story, we're definitely available, and it's going to be moving. So,
well, we appreciate it again for you coming in, and we appreciate you joining us on The Table, where we discuss issues of God and culture, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for listening to the Table Podcast. For more podcasts like this one, visit dts.edu/the table. Dallas Theological Seminary. Teach truth, love well.